Or Suzanne Shifflett. Thank you.
Suzanne Mary Shifflett.
Thank you
The
for
M.
joining me today. Oh, there's an M.
Yeah,
Suzanne M.
so when you go to the website, it's SM Shifflett, and the M stands for Mary. So.
Oh, well, that's a beautiful name. Do you come from French people?
I think on my dad's side, the Shiffletts came to Virginia from France. So,
Do you have artists in your family?
I have people who have had art as a hobby, crafts people, I guess, but not, professional artists so much.
When I was little, I would do art with my grandmother, my mom's mom, and she had a studio, and we'd go in and she'd let us play with the paints, and she'd take us on art walks.
Oh.
She did a lot of oils, and
Okay, that's what I do.
I associate that smell with my grandmother's studio. So you work in oils.
Mm-hmm. And that smell is like a comfort smell, for sure.
Is it turpentine?
No, turpentine.
Turpentine.
We don't use that so much anymore. It's the oil itself, the linseed or stand oil.
Oh.
And we've replaced turpentine with the Gamsol because it's not as headache producing and toxic. And I use a thing called spike lavender. And I put a little bit of that in my medium, and it smells like lavender, but it does the same thing that turpentine does.
Interesting.
Yeah, and it has a good smell.
So how did you get into art? Were you an artist as a kid?
I can't remember not doing art. One of my earliest memories is opening up a book with a blank page and having a crayon in my hand that seemed big, and my diapers crinkling and scribbling in the book. So yeah, my earliest memory is, making art. So.
Were you encouraged to do it?
Not really. My family was pretty poor. And it was just like, instead of having new toys all the time or whatever, I would just make things or draw fantasies.
Like what?
Cowboys and soldiers. My youngest years were in my grandmother's house, and she was the total matriarch. And it was a big house, so when members of the family would separate or get divorced, the women would always come and stay at my grandmother's. So it was always a lot of women and the men were gone. And so I fantasized that the men were off having great adventures because I watched like cowboy movies and war movies. And my dad was in the Air Force. So when I would see him, because my mom and dad were divorced, he would have a uniform on, which, reinforced that idea of, oh, they're off having all these fun adventures while all the women are at home miserable with the kids working in the factory, working chicken factory or sardine factory. And also as we had hardly any books, but we had this set of encyclopedias, and I would always go to the art sections and look at the different artists. And every artist name was a male name. So, if you were a man, you got to have adventures. You weren't stuck with the kids, and you got to be an artist. So it was like,
why wouldn't you want to be
that message? I know. It was just, yeah. So, ended up being, a tomboy, or identifying more with the male species.
Yeah, the masculine side.
Yeah, for sure.
And I don't want to skip too far ahead, but in a lot of your art, you're playing around with gender stuff. You have a lot of queer stuff. Was it always that way from a kid, or did you grow into that?
It actually was not consciously, really subconsciously, because I didn't paint women at all. Like, even in undergraduate, the only time I started painting or drawing women was when I started getting crushes on women and dating women. And then I would paint. Those paintings were about desire. And all the masculine paintings, even to this day, are about self-identification.
Interesting.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's more of a reflection of myself rather than you know, where the female things that are really female are almost always about desire.
You have some very evocative pieces.
Yes.
One that jumps to mind is you have an oyster with a pearl. That's very vulva and clitoral. Was that in college? Was that for a commission? Was that just for you?
It was just, I have a practice of painting, whether or not I have a show, or so it was just a painting for the sake of painting. But I had been seeing all these pictures on this website of oysters that look very female.
Mm-hmm.
And so I did my own version, and I put in real life, when you see it, there's like a rust texture in the background that plays off the really rough texture of the shell, then a bit fleshy inside, and a little pearl.
It's beautiful. When you started doing these types of paintings in college or whenever, did you get flack for that? Were you told to paint different types of things?
Yeah, I actually didn't start that so much in college. Just for disclosure, I'm 55, so I did go to graduate school just a couple of years ago, but that was only 2 years of my life. And before that, like, I finished undergraduate in 87. Like, when the more sexual things came up, because everything always had a little bit of a sexual edge, but not so explicit, and it was more subconscious, but the more conscious stuff came up when I was living in Portland, Oregon in the 90s, and I started doing a series of genitalia. Mm-hmm. And they all were like portraits of people's genitals. So instead of a face, because to me they were just as expressive. And I think I did 10 men and 10 women, and I had a show at Good Vibrations in San Francisco. Mm-hmm. And after that show, I sold all the female pieces right away, and then I had a few male pieces left. And I did get flack because a friend of mine who was a graduate student at Portland State, for one of his thesis projects was to put on a show with controversial work of people in the Portland area. And so he had like the Church of Satan's high priest or whatever did this satanic thing. Someone did something with blow up rubber dolls making a lamp. There were like weird fetus things. And I had 4 8x10 penises, or paintings of penises, in a little square like this on the wall. And before they even opened the show, and it was on the like 3rd floor in the arts area of the campus. And on the outside, by the way, on the outside, there were all of these life drawings of nudes from classes. So there was nudity. But so I put up these paintings, and before the show even opened, there was a complaint.
Because it was penis, showing a penis.
Penises, yep. Yeah. And after that, there was a big debate back and forth, like, should we close the doors or make it by appointment only? And then people are complaining, well, I pay to go to this, and like, why is the door being closed for this and not other things? Is this porn? Is this art? So it's a big discussion. And the curator of the show, the class that he taught, all they wanted to talk about was those paintings in the controversy. So it was such a weird thing to me, because the things that were violent, like the controversial violent pieces, no one said shit about.
Yeah.
So like that was the first time like I had any like feathers ruffled. And
what did you think about that? Like, I mean,
thought it was funny. I thought it was good because people talked and they were passionate about it, and people actually felt something about art. And at that time, my artist statement was, because we're so bombarded with images, now even more with the internet, we're bombarded with so many images all the time, constantly, that we become totally immune to things. We don't feel anything when we look at art. So for me, I was trying to think of things that you could look at and feel something about. And if you, try and find something that's going to physically affect you before you intellectualize it, would be like violence or something extremely cute. You go, oh,
Mm-hmm.
or, if something scary, you're like, ah. And, or if it's sexual, you get turned on. And I think that's why people get so crazy sometimes about porn or sexually explicit images is something will happen that you don't quite have control of.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? Like if you look at something and you get turned on by it, but you don't want to be turned on by it.
Interesting.
Yeah, so that was kind of my thinking with the more sexually explicit pieces.
I read in when I was researching you that you talk about having dyslexia, and I'm
Yep.
really curious if that shows up in art, and if it does, how.
That's a good question. Well, it did keep me from going to graduate school for a while, and why I decided I could go was I got Dragon Dictate. It's a dictation program.
Ah.
So you just wear headphones and a little microphone and you speak, and it,
Oh, I see.
Yep. Yeah, because when I took the test for dyslexia, which is the first real test I took was before I went to graduate school. Spelling and reading comprehension was like way below average, but verbal communication and reasoning was really, really high, higher than even the visual art stuff. So I just had to figure out a way like to make it work to write my paper, my thesis paper for school.
What was that like for you growing up then? With you didn't know that you were dyslexic?
Well, I knew something was wrong because I was sent to the resource room every afternoon, or also known as the retard room. Bad name,
Oh.
but so I got teased for that, and yeah, it really played on my self-esteem. And I was like super shy kid, so I was really shy. I was having trouble in school, and I was a tomboy, also known as a butch.
Mm-hmm.
So it really made me focus on art more, I think, because I, would escape into the world of drawing and painting.
Yeah.
That's, yeah, I think that's how it affects my art, because I'm a very visual person. And for me to understand things, I have to hear it. So books on tape are great for me.
Mm-hmm.
Before books on tape, it would take me like a year to read a book. I would have my one book that year to sit down and slowly go through.
Yeah. I love to listen to the books on tape while I'm driving. But I teach workshops, and it's interesting. People come with different learning styles into the workshops, and I'll get all the way done teaching something one way, and then I'll have 2 or 3 people say, but could you do it like this? And then I'll teach those people a different way. I think, at least I hope, we're way more cognizant of that now, that people just have different learning styles. You need to learn it a different way.
Yeah, for sure.
I'm curious if your tattooing came, where does tattooing come into your career, into your art?
Well, I started tattooing in '89, so about a little over 30 years ago. I think it has affected my painting by having my painting being very precise, because it's tattooing so detail oriented that I just focus in on that. A lot of tattooists will do the opposite and paint really loose because you're like, oh, this is my chance to be loose. But, part of painting for me is escaping into the whatever it is I'm doing.
Mm-hmm.
And I really enjoy like getting in there, getting every little detail.
What was it like the first time moving from canvas to skin?
Oh, it's terrifying.
Was it?
Like the worst part was hurting someone. Like I felt very confident about my artistic ability, but hurting people was so not like my natural state of being. Like I went home and cried. Like for, the first few tattoos, I would just go home and cry like, oh, that was so hard and that was so stressful.
And they're probably saying thank you and this is beautiful and I love it.
Yeah.
And you're
And I'm like, ah. Yeah, I totally had to tap into my inner Dom. So
yeah, I was going to ask if
yeah,
you get into a mental space like that.
Yep, you have to. You have to be confident, and and you have to be in charge, and get the person to, feel comfortable and feel like you know what you're doing. Yeah, because the worst thing is tattoos who are
So
hesitant or scared.
Yeah. Well, I have a lot of tattoos and I have people ask me, do they hurt? I'm like, yes.
Yeah.
They hurt, but it's worth it. It's a good pain at the end of the day.
It's pain's temporary. So.
And you've got a lot of tattoos. We can see
yeah.
some on your neck and I know you've got some on sleeves.
Yeah.
Do you do any of your own work? Do you have certain people you trust? What's your philosophy about it?
I don't get tattooed so much anymore. I haven't in a long time. When I first started, I would tattoo myself, but learned that wasn't a good idea. I don't get tattooed as much anymore. I mean, I do have some space on my legs and stuff, but I don't know. Like, I could make up probably a good story around it, but
what kinds of things do you get tattooed on you? Are they stories? Are they just designs you like?
Just designs are almost purely aesthetic.
Are you creating them first and then they're being put on your body?
Yeah. I usually draw them. So like the ones on my neck, I really had to make fit perfect, because it started lower and then it slowly came up. So it goes like pretty far down.
Yeah. Do you have a favorite tattoo?
Yeah.
I do.
I've thought about more like what interests me more than actually tattoo designs on myself is, or even in other people, is more like the psychology behind it. Like for me, when I first started tattooing was really taboo and women didn't get heavily tattooed. But it was such an outsider art, and I was a total punk, like had a mohawk and punk music. And it was like armor and being part of, this gang, where you're setting yourself outside of society. And I didn't know at the time when I was learning that it was going to become wildly popular and a career. Like it was more like an art job that I could do.
Yeah.
And then, it exploded and it was just a coincidence, and it's been great, like as steady work and, full-time employment. The thing that is kind of sad to me is it's become homogenized and not so much a form of self-expression or rebellion.
Yeah, everybody's got one now.
I mean, around graduation time, every year, the tattoo studio gets people who are just turning 18 and graduating and off on their own. And it's like a rite of passage. It's their first thing they get to choose to do to themselves. That is 100% their choice, because they couldn't do it at, 17. They can only do it at 18. And they can't even drink yet, in some states you can't even smoke. So, it is really a rite of passage kind of thing, a choice. And it's permanent. So they, their first life-changing.
Is there a tattoo that you do the most for that demographic?
It changes every year.
Yeah.
Yeah. Every year there's just a new thing, For a while, people were getting feathers, people were getting kanji, people were getting Arabic script. This year, lately, it's Roman numerals.
Roman numerals.
Yeah,
Okay.
they're super popular right now. Do a lot of those.
You're
Yeah,
you're up on the trends. You know what's going on with the youth of today.
with the tattoo youth. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, and more women are getting tattooed than men now.
What's the oldest person you've had come in and get a tattoo who had no tattoo before, a virgin?
Oh, no tattoos? I did a woman who was like, I think it was her 80th birthday or something. And yeah, and she came in with a leather mini skirt. She was so cute. It was in Portland.
Awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah, and she was like, my mom's rolling in her grave.
You live and work in Southern California, true?
Yeah, right now I'm in Long Beach. Yep.
Yes.
Yeah. I've been in San Francisco most of my adult life. And after graduate school, which was in Orange County, which was quite the culture shock, it was too expensive for me to move back to San Francisco and try and paint as much as I wanted to, because I would have to tattoo full time to live there.
Yeah.
So now I just tattoo a few days a week and I paint the rest of the time.
Nice. And so do you have self-care? Do you use art as self-care? Do you do something else as self-care?
I think art is self-care, yeah.
Even though you earn money with it. This is the thing, is that people say, yes, it is, but I also make my living. And so then it's work. And so.
Well, if I didn't get paid for it, I would do it, because for years and years, I haven't gotten paid for it. There's no way I would not do it. So, and if I haven't painted in like 3 or 4 days, I start getting really antsy, or made art in some form.
Yeah.
I start getting really antsy, and like it's almost like meditation or something. Like it totally settles me down, and
that's awesome.
It helps curb anxiety.
Yeah. Do you have other things too that you do?
I like riding my motorcycle and working on my motorcycle.
What kind of motorcycle do you have?
I have two. I have a Ducati I've had for like 10 years, and I have a newer bike, a Harley Davidson FXR. It's an older bike, but new to me. That's my new fun one, because the sports bike hurts. My hips are kind of sore, so I have hip dysplasia. So I can't ride more than like an hour on the Ducati because of the position. It's a little aggressive. And then the newer bike is a cruiser, so I can just cruise around town wherever for as long as I want. I'm fine.
How do you feel about getting older?
I feel like my body's betraying me a little bit, because mentally I feel like young. Like I'm always, listening to new books or studying new things, or, like I always have some subject I'm really like into that's new. And so, especially, going to graduate school and stuff, like I figured out like, okay, here's my learning style, and I've, really honed in on that, instead of just like following an interest down a little path until I get bored. Now I have a little bit better concentration, and I feel like I'm learning new stuff. So my mind feels like I'm still 12, but my body's not agreeing with that.
Yeah. I think it's true what they say, where you finally learn how to enjoy life, and then your body is getting too old.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, and it's just dumb little things like it takes longer to get out of bed. Like I feel a little creepy.
Yeah.
And I've gone through menopause, so like my sex drive is not the same as it used to be. In my social interaction, like I don't feel the need to be social really. So like our quarantine we're in right now.
No big deal for you.
No big deal, but Everything's kind of the same. Um,
Does
yeah,
that take a mental toll? I mean, do you feel isolated, or you're just great?
no, because this is what I do anyway. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, I'm a painter, so I'm at home all the time anyway. Yeah, no. And I'm kind of new to this area, so I don't have a whole shitload of friends. And I will Skype or FaceTime my friends
Hmm.
in San Francisco or Portland or wherever. Um, so, that's the same too. So, yeah, doesn't matter so much. And I haven't been dating, so that's doesn't matter.
You couldn't date right now anyway.
I know. I know it's kind of the perfect time, I think, for people who are like doing online dating to find alternative ways to get to know people.
Hmm.
'Cause the one thing I don't like about the dating sites, and I stopped using them, was you would look at the picture and you could swipe left or right without even like talking to the person or feeling
Yeah.
any energy or like, because I really am a big believer in chemistry, like,
Yeah.
meeting someone and talking to them. And it sometimes not even so much what they say, but how they carry themselves.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah. And, just how you feel around them.
I'm with you on that, Suzanne. I feel really uncomfortable on the dating sites making a decision about swiping yes or no based on 2 seconds of seeing a picture. It
Yep.
feels bad.
Yeah. And I was having this total, like, because in San Francisco, I did it a bunch. And, moving here, and I would go on dates too. And they never really panned out very often. And so here, when I was doing it, it was feeling weird because also uh, just like the culture here is different. So like there's a lot of like uh, what you would imagine like women from the L word look like.
Hmm.
Like there's a lot of that going on here. And like butch identity is not as predominant here. Um, yeah, so it was really weird, like getting messages from women that look like human Barbies, like
Yeah.
fake blondes, fake boob, like, you know. Uh, so I was feeling bad if I was swiping away from people not looking at their profile or not considering someone, like I was feeling like I'm such an asshole. But then I would get something, like a message from someone that looked, like a porn star or like every teenage boy's wet dream. That's the
Hmm.
only way to think of it. Like,
Hmm.
and I would be like, why are they contacting me? Are they phishing? Is this a like, because they almost seem too much like a made up human being that they weren't real. You know what I mean?
Uh-huh. Did you meet any of them?
No, I haven't met any of the people in person from,
Hmm.
yeah. And so a while ago, I just was like, I have to just take these off my phone because it's just freaking me out a little bit. Like just the runaround I was doing in my own head, and it, everything was my own making, nothing was like, like
Yeah.
people are just living their lives and using the dating site and, like all the issues I was having with it was my own
Yeah. And
doing.
have you ever sat by anybody else who's on it and they just go like this and they have no qualms at all about it, which is maybe how it's supposed to be done?
Yeah, yeah, I guess so.
I
And in
don't know.
San Francisco, like it was fun because you'd see people you knew. You'd be
Hmm.
like, "Hi, I saw you on the dating site or whatever," and it was easy for me to go out. Like, I have a little bit of social anxiety, so I would like
Hmm.
to go to the same places or places where I would know people. Like, I live really close to the Eagle in San Francisco.
Hmm.
I would go there a lot, and being a tattooist for so many years, and mostly having queer community as clientele, uh, I knew a lot of people. So
Hmm.
no matter what event I went to, I would find people. And here it's just like I don't know anyone, and I'm, if I go to a bar or an event, I'm the oldest person in the room. So
Yeah.
yeah, so it's a totally different.
I'm 49. We're similar. We're in the
Right.
same.
Yeah. We're in the
Yeah.
same.
And I got to go to Portland, and do you know the magazine Butch is Not a Dirty Word? There's a magazine called
Yep.
Butch,
Yep.
Not a Dirty
Yep.
Word. I have a piece in there, and so I got to read.
Okay.
And that was the first time, maybe in my entire life, that I had been in a room that was just queer people and
Really?
predominantly Butch.
Wow.
And it was amazing. Because I grew up in Southern
Wow.
Utah. There's
Okay.
not a lot, not a lot of examples for me out there, but it was amazing to see myself represented
Yeah.
in the
Yeah.
entire room.
Yeah. In San Francisco, you know, I moved there the first time when I was like 22. And it was like heaven, you know, being 22-year-old little Butch. Like, I remember going, like, the first night I went out to a club. It was a night at this club called Female Trouble.
Mm.
And it was in the Upper Haight. And there's all these motorcycles out front. And I'm from Maine. So you can imagine the teeny population of queers there, right?
Mm.
So I saw all these motorcycles out front. And I was like, I wonder if this is the right place. Like, look at all these. And then I realized all the bikes were women's bikes.
That's pretty
And
cool.
I was so happy. I was like, oh my God, this is freaking amazing. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it was like great. It was such a, you know, like, you know, the sky opening up and a big light coming down.
It means so much, though. It means so much to see yourself represented.
Oh, well, and that is part of like my newer paintings with, you know, reflection of, you know, the Butch experience.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that is part of it, is we don't see ourselves, you know, like in art.
Yeah.
So, you know, in the queer community, there are tons of artists, right? And in the art world itself, there are a lot of, someone needs to write, well, there are a couple of books, but none that are all that great. You know, in the history of art, there's lots of queerness,
Mm-hmm.
I should say. In, you know, being gay or lesbian or queer,
Mm-hmm.
which is a little newer, wasn't really an identity until the turn of the century. And so there would be queer artists who would have things in their art that were like, if you were gay, you would say, oh, that is so gay, right?
Mm-hmm.
I can tell, like, I see myself in that. But the straight world wouldn't notice it because it would be just so subtle that you didn't, you know, it didn't occur to you. And because you didn't have an identity as being, you know, queer or gay or lesbian, you know, because like if, like say Leonardo or Michelangelo, like there are all these artists through history that are fucking amazing, changed the world with their art, but they didn't have a label of queer. And, you know, in society in general, like sodomy was just a word for weird sex. It wasn't like fucking in the house like now. People just associate it with that. So you wouldn't see an artist and say, oh, that guy's gay or that guy's whatever. It would just be more like, you know, this person has sex with the same sex. But that's not who they are, right? Because you would get married. Like marriage as a romantic concept is only a recent thing. Because marriage used to be more like families to get together or to have children, or sometimes to join countries. Like, you know, you would have one member of the royal family marry a member of a royal family from another country. And it wasn't like until like Jane Austen and all of those, books that, made us believe that you're only supposed to marry the people that you love. Did that idea come into play?
Right.
So, yeah. So, I think when, like when Oscar Wilde was thrown into prison, and it was kind of a big deal, and people were focusing on that. And being gay started to become an identity because it was forced on us
Mm-hmm.
as an identity, and we turned around and flipped it, like,
Mm-hmm.
we're going to embrace this as our identity, because we were just so persecuted for so many years until, there was like, the gay panic during the McCarthy era, where, and it affects artists so much because there are always a lot of queer people in art.
Mm-hmm.
It's just how it's been. But like during the McCarthy era in America, that gay identity was like so dangerous to have. You could be thrown in jail, or you could be thrown into an institution,
Right.
that you would really have to hide that. If you wanted those signals in your art, you really had to hide that. And it's just like, like when I think about that, looking at art now,
Mm-hmm.
we haven't had like a movement in art that is just about our gay identity. Like there are gay artists, and there always have been, but
Mm-hmm.
their art is not about that. So, I feel like it's time for us to, paint about our lives and who we are, and, that we're human beings, and actually, that have like this big range of feelings, um, and not just, make kitsch or, art that is, like fun and happy, but make art that is like amazing.
Hmm.
Because, I've never wanted to be just a good artist. I've always wanted to be a great artist. And I've always wanted my art to say something, and even subconsciously, being that little kid drawing cowboys and painting cowboys and
Mm-hmm.
soldiers and men, like playing around with that idea of masculine identity. Like
Mm-hmm.
it was very subconscious, but it was like my subconscious trying to, grapple with this idea that, you're put into this female body and you're expected to fit these roles, but
Mm-hmm.
really what you want is you want this.
Yeah. I identify with that so much, being raised in a Mormon family. And there's one right way for women to be, and there's one right way for men to be. And I'm neither one of those things. It's very
Yep.
confusing.
Yep.
Yeah. So if you had to distill down what you want your art to say, or what you think it does say, what is that? What are you saying?
One thing that's hard. Well, I I have this idea of that if you're of communication with art, where if you paint well enough that your skill level is so high and your message is clear
Mm-hmm.
and out there, people can't ignore it. Like if you're an art critic, because there have been a lot of like homophobic art critics who really, there have been all these, artists being called decorative, or, like there's all these terms put on
Yeah.
art, basically saying, we don't want to look at this because it's gay or queer, whatever. If I think if, a painting could be done well enough in that it touches people visually, like you visually look at it and you want to look at it and you get closer, like enough that, you stop and consider what's going on. I think that's such a great opportunity to like send a message to other people who might not be living the same experience as you, that, you know, hey, you know, we're human too, and this is, you know, here's a little peek into my world, or
Mm-hmm.
here's a little peek into my experience. And then on the flip side of that, having people who aren't represented, whose experiences aren't represented, like for me, you know, being butch and being female, or being a masculine female, um, those who haven't been represented get to see themselves.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so I think that's kind of the, like, it's the two-headed.
Yeah, yeah. I'm going to shift focus a little bit because we're almost out of time. And I really want to know, how do you define success for yourself? What is a successful day for you?
Successful day is I get up, walk my dog, and get to paint most of the day.
Nothing in there about money. You have to earn a certain amount of money.
Well, it's nice to not worry about paying rent and not to have that stress. But you know, like I've never fantasized about being rich or having tons of crap.
Mm-hmm.
Like the most important thing is that I'm not so stressed that I can't sit down and work on a painting, or, you know, have that time, you know, so much time a day to just paint and, you know, be in my studio.
It's pretty good.
Yeah, living my best life.
Have you failed big before, or publicly? And if so, what did you learn from it?
Failed big. I don't know if I failed big. I've failed little, a lot, often.
Okay, that's good too. I think we all do. What have
You
you
know,
learned from your
I think,
failures?
I don't know. I just keep moving on, and, you know, keep trying, take the next step.
I asked this question specifically because people who are coming into creative, you know, lives, they think no one fails who is successful.
Oh, yeah.
And so I try to bring up failures so that they can see that you're going to fail and it's part of it and it's okay.
Yeah. Well, every painting is a little bit of a failure to me.
Interesting.
Like, I don't have a painting that I'm like, this is perfect, everything's perfect. Like, there's just, like, when I'm working on a painting, at some point I'm like, okay, this has to be done, because I don't know what to do to fix it or to make it perfect. So then I move on to the next thing. Yeah, every painting I've ever done there's a little failure somewhere in there.
I love
Like,
that
at some
though.
point, yeah. Yeah.
That's great.
You know, yeah. And I'm not attached to my paintings. Like, if, you know, someone wants to buy one, I'll part with it, so I can, you know, it gives me the privilege of working on more paintings.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Do you have any tips for new artists coming in, how to get started, what you did that they could replicate?
Uh, I, you know, I was talking to a friend about this because of our quarantine. I told them, hey, you've always wanted to write this novel. This is your chance to write the novel. And they're like, how do you get started? And if you can not be focused on like having some finished thing, like with painting, don't worry about like having a finished thing, but think about like, all right, I'm going to get up and take baby steps. Like, I'm going to get up, make myself do this for an hour today.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to do it for, you know, maybe a little longer tomorrow, because it takes, you know, a couple weeks for something to become a habit. And, you know, just like going to the gym, when you first go to the gym, it's like shitty as hell. But if
Mm-hmm.
you keep going, it becomes a habit, and you don't even think about it after a while, and you're just doing it. And yeah, painting's the same way. Painting is not like riding a bicycle. You know, you don't like just jump in and go in where you left off the last time you did it. Like, every time it's a little bit like, all right, let me get my head into the space and, you know, push more and more into that.
So do it.
Yeah. So
Do it.
yeah, just like give yourself, like, start off small and then slowly work up. Like, okay, tomorrow I'm going to wake up, do this thing, sit down for an hour and paint. And if you want to keep going, but at least make yourself sit that like first hour.
That's
Because
pretty good advice.
because you can sit and fantasize about doing whatever, and it's just fantasy until you take some step, like something you can handle.
Yeah.
Because if you decide I'm going to do a huge painting, this is what I'm going to do, and it's like in front of you, this looming thing, you know, it's just going to stress you out and you're not going to
Yeah.
finish. But if you start like, all right, first I'm going to start like preparing things to paint on. And
Yeah.
then I'm going to do some tests. And then I'm going to do small painting. And then,
Break it down, bite-sized
yeah,
pieces,
yeah.
and then do it every day.
Yeah, just like each day, like, okay, I'm going to do this one thing today. If I can stop when I'm done, I have to at least go there. I can stop when I'm done,
Mm-hmm.
or I can keep going if I feel like keep going. But just so you start building up your confidence and feeling of accomplishment, because you have done the little thing that eventually adds up to the big thing.
Yeah, I love that. All the big things are made out of little pieces.
Yeah, exactly.
You don't just do the one big thing that one day. Do you ever throw canvases away, or do you reuse them?
Oh, you know what I did once? It's funny. I was moving, so I took a bunch of paintings and I threw them into the Goodwill bin.
And then people ended
then
up with them?
someone said, well, I know one of them. Then about 15 years later, I got an email from someone saying, did you do this painting? And it was of a G.I. Joe.
Yeah.
And I said, I did do that painting. How did you get that painting? And they're like, well, and it was in Florida. And this was when I was in Portland. When I moved from Portland, I got rid of all the stuff. He was like, oh, I bought it someplace at a flea market or something. So it had a little life of its own. And he put it in on a blog called The Joe Report about G.I. Joes.
That's awesome.
I know, it was funny. It was just like, yeah, all these paintings go off and have their own lives, like apart from me, It was pretty amazing. I was pretty excited about that.
We are out of time. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
For chatting with me today.
Okay.